college football hills that we're willing to die on in the preseason. Now, for context, last year, I was willing to die on the hill that Wisconsin was going to be in that Big Ten title game. I was also willing to die on the hill that Joe Milton was going to be just phenomenal at Tennessee.
I'm so glad you said it. I still have it on my phone for media days. You said he was going to be a top quarterback in the country.
I was sold. I was sold. So, I mean, tread lightly if you want to. You want to get us started here with a college football take that maybe you're willing to die on here before week 0?
Kirby Smart's going to the NFL. No, I'm kidding.
Whoa.
Hills I'm willing to die on. I'll tell you what. I'll start lightly, and I'll start with a team. Nice. Celsius and everything. We are,
a little bit of
juice,
on the same page. A little bit of juice.
First one. You know what? I won't start in the SEC. I'll start with this one because I believe in it, I think, the most. Michigan will fall off the face of the earth this year. And maybe that looks like 8-4 or 9-3. I don't know. But compared to what they've done the past 2 to 3 seasons, it's going to be night and day. Like half the coaching staff's gone. Connor Stalions is gone. First-round quarterback is gone. Head coach is gone. And at some point, the schedule has to get easier, right? Like last year, they didn't play a ranked opponent until week 11, so like halfway through November. That's almost impossible. Also, last year against Nebraska is the first time they played a September game against a Power 5 opponent on the road in the month of September since like 2018. And, of course, it was on the very last day of the month. I think that they are going to have a much more difficult road with the added teams in that conference now. So I think they're going to fall off the face of the earth.
I mean, I don't hate that take at all. And when you look at what they have on the schedule, like there's a real chance they could go 9-3. And I am also very pro Michigan. Like I think they're a bit sneaky heading into this year because they lost so much production, and they're kind of in some ways, like if you're Michigan, the pressure's off. Like you won the national title last year, a lot of new pieces. The Big Ten's looking a little bit more shiny with Oregon in there and Ohio State and their new roster. Chris, they could have a year where they go 9-3 with 3 top 5 losses with Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State, which is wild. So while you can't go from an undefeated season and win a national championship to 3 losses, like that would probably not be the folks in Ann Arbor's favorite way to ring in the Sharon Moore era, but I don't think like that 9-3 would be cause for panic either at the exact same time.
No, the Michigan fans are pretty logical. I feel like they're pretty smart. Like if you don't mind, like if you can bring the graphic back up, here's my take on why Michigan is not going to go 10-2 or 9-3. It's because we see this all the time. Like I'm not comparing Sharon Moore to these 2 coaches, but we saw it with Saban year 1, 7-6, lost to ULM. Kirby lost to Vandy, Georgia Tech, like every single one of their rivals year 1. Like it takes a second to get like your feet wet and figure this whole head coaching thing out. You cannot convince me that looking at the schedule, they don't slip up somewhere. Like I don't know where it would be. Maybe it's a Jed Fish team at Washington. Maybe it's Michigan State who's going to be much better coached. USC at home. I don't know. But they are going to slip up at some point because it feels like all those other teams got better for the most part. And I don't know if Michigan did.
And Chris, here's the other thing too that I think is kind of fascinating. Like, if Michigan is sitting there at 9-3 and they have those 3 top 5 losses, and they do take a step backwards from where they were last year, which is pretty explainable based on what they have coming back. Like, does 9-3 with the right things happening around you backdoor you into the college football playoff? Like, I don't think it does. But they could take a step backwards and still like stumble their way into a 12-team field, which is kind of wild to think about.
And I don't know what it's going to look like with the Big Ten versus like the SEC, because I think the idea that both those conferences are just going to automatically get 4 teams in every year is a pipe dream. But I think what you just said, it mirrors exactly what I think about Alabama going into this year, which is like the schedule's pretty brutal for Bama, and they could have a really good year, first year under a new head coach with 39 players lost in the portal, all that, replacing the GOAT. If you go 9-3, that's a good year. That's a good first year. I don't think that gets them in the playoff, because if you have like a bottleneck or logjam of 10-2 teams with like Tennessee and Mizzou and all that, like I think what might end up happening, for a hot take here, Bama and Michigan are going to end up playing in some non-CFP bowl in front of like a half-full stadium, and just it'll be the best that never was type situation. Those guys just reminiscing of the glory days.
Just running back the Rose Bowl, but instead of the Rose Bowl, it's the Tax Slayer, or it's the Orange Bowl, the Capital One Orange Bowl. Like, I mean, I'm here for it. Don't get it twisted. I'm here for it. But that's going to be, the cutoff is going to be really interesting, because I do think 10-2 is probably the fence to get into the college football playoff. Let's stay in the Big Ten here. I got a hell I'm willing to die on here. And I don't understand why it's gotten so much pushback whenever we've said this. There's this thought that, like, Will Howard is somehow not an upgrade from Kyle McCord. And I love Kyle McCord. Like, I hope he goes and throws for 5,000 yards at Syracuse. I hope he sets records. I hope he is the second coming of Donovan McNabb out there. But Will Howard, no matter how you slice it, to me, is an upgrade. Now, is that enough to win a national championship? Remains to be seen. But I don't think it's this massive argument. Like, last year, Kyle McCord ran for negative rushing yards on the season. And that's because you factor in sacks. I get that. But Will Howard had like 9 rushing touchdowns or something crazy like that. Like, you can do more things with Will Howard at quarterback than you can with Kyle McCord. Also, Kyle McCord's first year playing quarterback as a starter. Like, Will Howard's been playing ball now going on his 5th year. So I just think this thought that Will Howard somehow isn't an upgrade, to me, feels a little bit illogical.
I will say that he's going to have one of the best QB coaches in the country. He's going to have he's going to have maybe the most talented roster around him on both sides of the ball, like including Georgia, like of any team in the country. So he's got a ton of like supporting cast and talent, all that kind of stuff. The thing with Will Howard is like, what's the best way to put this? Like, he is like an infielder that's just going to go out and go 1 for 4 every day. Sometimes 2 for 4, maybe hit like 10 to 15 home runs like in a season. But like, Will Howard is good for 2 touchdowns every single game, no matter what. Like every single game, you look at the stat sheet, you look at like the box score, he is going to account for at least 2 touchdowns every single game. I will say, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I have in one of my hot takes that I think Julian Sayin might end up being the starter by year's end.
Whoa.
Just because I think the upside with him is way more. And I think that the way the schedule sets up, you could probably get away with him taking some time to develop. And he's an early enrollee guy. And that's not taking anything away from Will Howard. It's more so saying the fact that Julian Sayin is like an incredible QB. Like, when's the last time a quarterback at Ohio State's failed?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say Kyle McCord in a lot of ways didn't check the box they expect, but like, I mean, you go down the line.
They were 11-1?
A lot of really good ones, yeah. And if you're calling 11-1 a failure, like, I don't know. That's a high bar to set.
Agreed. Is it mine?
It's all you.
I think that Blue Bloods are going to be back.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about like the show. I think it's like on CBS or something like that. That'll probably also be back. My grandma's going to be real pumped about it. But I think Blue Bloods are going to be back. And I've been saying this for a couple of years now, that with NIL, one of the byproducts of that was going to see like these like kind of dormant former national powers that have deep pockets, still a lot of passion and like massive like footprint across the country for their fan base, and like a hunger, right? Like they want to win because you haven't done that in quite some time. And I think we talk about like Tennessee, USC, Miami, Texas is probably a year ahead of all those guys. Those teams, I feel like in the NIL era, are going to always be at least relevant, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's from a spending standpoint or it's on the field. I think Tennessee is a team that I'll just piggyback on this one. I think Tennessee makes the college football playoff this year. And I think that Miami is I compared them and Ole Miss to like a Major League Baseball team after the All-Star break that like feels like this could be a year where like, let's go make a trade. Let's go all in on this year, because both those teams are all in on this year being the year. But I think like, as a whole, I think national brands, Nebraska is going to be somewhat fun to watch because of Dylan Raiola and like a 7-win Nebraska season would be, I think, fun for everyone. Like, so.
Oh, it'd be a vibe. It'd be an absolute vibe.
Yeah.
No, I think what you're saying is on the money, because the thing that we've talked about on our show a lot is like the care factor now mattering more than ever. Like if you have a fan base that legitimately lives, breathes, cares about your football team year round, that's going to translate in some respect to how much money they're willing to spend to support your team. Let's go with I want to talk about this 5 seed in the college football playoff, because I am dying on the hill that is going to be an advantageous spot, to say the least. I think it's a dangerous spot depending on who ends up there. The scenario I keep running through in my mind is, what if a team like Georgia, let's say they drop a game at Texas, let's say they drop a game in Tuscaloosa to your Crimson Tide. They're 10-2. I don't know exactly if 10-2 puts you in the 5 spot, but let's say Georgia somehow stumbles into the 5 spot. You put them in that 5
Right.
spot and they draw some poor, unsuspecting G5 team in the first round. That might as well be a bye because you get them in Athens. And in the second round, instead of having to play the winner of like the 8-9 or let's say the 7-10, which is probably an SEC team or a Big Ten team, you probably you draw rather the Big 12 champ, I'm assuming, in that 4 spot. Georgia, I'm probably taking over every single team in the Big 12 as we sit here right now in June. So I think that 5 spot, depending on who it is going to have a massive say on who ends up playing, at least for the semifinals and maybe the national title, Chris.
Dude, look a year ago. Like, look a year ago. Georgia was the #1 team in the country, they lost 2 games in 3 years on neutral fields to the same team, and they dropped from 1 to 6 because it was just one of those bizarre years. I kept comparing it to like 1994, which is probably before your time, but like tons of 11-1, 12-0 teams. How are they going to figure out who wins the national championship? You got like all these like undefeated teams like playing each other. You don't have that last year, but you had. There's no way in any logical place that Georgia should have dropped out of the top 4. You know, it makes sense, I guess, because of what happened in Atlanta. But dude, you tell me that Kirby Smart, with the amount of like fictional motivation that he constantly tries to give his team, you're going to see a lack of, like, what's the best way to put this? Like a lack of not prioritizing, but like importance from conference championship games, especially like in the SEC. Because if you're Georgia last year and you got all those injuries, you're telling me that Kirby, who, sees the big picture better than any other coach in the country, he's not going to be okay with losing that game, getting the 5 spot, then getting a chip on his shoulder, and then running roughshod over everyone? Like, that's a dream for him.
Oh, it's perfect. I mean, if you can convince your team after winning a national championship, people think you're going to somehow be 7-5. It's like, no,
Still to this day, it's like,
that is mind games. Maybe I think that was after the first national title. We got that soundbite from Nolan Smith.
It was the second one. It makes you just worried about the kids and how gullible they are in this day and age. That's what it did for me. I was very concerned with Nolan. What's his name?
Nolan Smith.
Number 4, whoever it was.
Yeah.
That was a wild moment after the national championship.
It was crazy. It was a little bit crazy, a little bit out there. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.